Hello and welcome. Welcome. I'd like to thank the leadership at Surfing Heritage and Culture Center for honoring women tonight. Our Executive Director, Glenn Brumage, my fellow Board of Directors members, and especially our very hardworking Gala Committee. And thank you to all of you here tonight, because your presence is acknowledging and supporting the fact that Surfing Heritage and Culture Center is honoring women. Thank you. Later tonight, you will hear about our 4 very special honorees. Joyce Hoffman, 4-time U.S. surfing champion. Someone that I always look up to. Lisa Anderson, whose surfing was so spectacular, and who, along with Randy Dale, brought surf the first marketing explosion in women's surfing. And Stephanie Gilmore, who right before our very eyes is bringing women's surfing to yet another level. And of course, Rel Sun, whose grace and aloha are shining examples of what surfing is all about. When Glenn asked me to make these opening remarks, he wanted me to set the stage, sharing perspective and legacy, to help you understand the challenges of what being part of the surfing world has meant for us women. Never in my day would an organization have felt compelled to honor only women. It has taken so much to get where we are today, and many of the women here tonight helped pave the way. I thought I'd frame my remarks around my 3 least favorite headlines about women surfers during the birth of pro surfing. And notice I'm not saying during the birth of women's pro surfing, but rather just the birth of pro surfing, because that's what men say when they refer to their history. They just claim the sport. It's the birth of surfing. So I'm claiming it too. Tonight we'll be talking about the birth of surfing. On the first world tour in 1976, there were only 6 of us. Myself, Sally Prang, Rel Sun, Becky Benson, Jericho Poplar, and Claudia Kravitz. Our first contest on the tour was the women's chapstick pro, held in conjunction with the men's Gunson 500. But 2 days before the event, the chapstick sponsors asked to meet with us. Look, they said, we don't really have the money. We didn't think you'd really show up. We didn't think you'd come all the way to South Africa. So we want to propose that we hold a nationwide raffle. And the winner will get his choice of whichever one of you he wants for a date, whichever one he desires. We said no, and they came up with the mere pittance and total prize money. All prize money combined about $1,000, less than it took to meet the IPS minimum and be sanctioned. My first least favorite quote was posed to the 6 of us while on that tour. We've been surfing up a storm around the world, and the likes of which some of these countries had never seen. And journalists were clamoring to interview us, and we thought, oh, that's great, we'll get sponsors. But then we heard the first question out of the mouth of the first journalist to interview us. He was from a mainstream magazine, and he asked, have you ever surfed naked? Rel Sun jumped in with that answer, and God bless her, because I was so stunned I didn't know what to say. She said, no, that's stupid. It would be too scratchy, it would just chafe you and it would hurt. The journalist used her quote, except for that part about his question being stupid. My second least favorite quote was in a newspaper article about another one of our contests. A reporter noted that the women surfers had caused, quote, a wave of excitement on the tour, quote, but women are still traditionally tied to hearth and home, and the women surfers must go back now to their husbands again, to the lonely hot stove and the children. A woman wrote that article. It evidenced a presumption held by many people at the time as to where women belonged, and it certainly was not in the ocean. It's easy to see why it was always so difficult for women to find sponsorship compared to men, not only for our contests, but for us as individuals. WISA, Women's International Surfing Association, did a great job finding contest sponsors. held their own pro contest in September 1975 in Malibu. It was the first pro event that was comprised only of women, and I was honored to be invited to surf in it. They awarded real money, had excellent judges, and showed the surfing world what women could do. Margot Oberg won. Can I ask those of you who were founders of WISA to please stand up? And then can I also ask any of the women who surfed in those WISA contests to also stand up? Drummy. Yeah. Mary, we missed you with the leg. Happy birthday! In Hawaii, we had formed a similar group, the Hawaii Women Surfing Hui. Those were my friends, and whose leaders included many Hawaii women who aren't here tonight, such as Linda McCrary, Rel Sun, Jeannie Chesser, Sally Prang, Lynn Boyer, Laola Lake, Claudia Rueva, Becky Benson, and more. I was pro-competition director for the Hui, and rather than hold our own contest, we opted to work directly with Fred Hemmings because he was the one major surf contest organizer at the time, running more events than anyone right there in Hawaii. For the men's swim-up pro in the early 70s, held in Hawaii, in really big waves on the North Shore, Fred had invited one woman and one woman only to compete against the men. Now that was Laura Blurs-Ching. Now Laura was an excellent surfer, and she was not afraid of big waves. She was a charger, and I liked her. But there were no criteria in those days to decide how to issue invitations. Even for the men, it was just usually word of mouth or reputation. And Laura's name was very well known. She had just posed for Playboy magazine. At a Hui meeting, the women suggested maybe one of us could open a dialogue with Fred, and somehow I was chosen. Over the next couple years, I worked with Fred to create a rating system to determine who would receive invitations to his contests. Fred agreed that the Hui would get some, and we instituted a ranking system to determine how to distribute them in a fair and consistent manner. Fred then did the same with WISA, and also through the Hui, I began to run an open qualifying contest so that top placers could receive invitations as well. Our first event was an expression session in March '75, and that leads to my third quote. Expression sessions had been held by the men in the past to attract photographers. Top surfers would surf in heats, but the heats weren't judged like regular contests. There were no winners or losers. The photographers would get their shots, and the surfers would get exposure, and we anticipated it would help us garner the attention of the surf magazines and get sponsors. We chose Rocky Point on the North Shore. If you've ever surfed Rockies, you know that it breaks so close to shore and is very easy for a photographer to shoot. We wanted to make it easy, but hardly any of them showed up. Certainly none of the A-listers. And in their defense, they told me, the magazines won't buy photos of women, so we can't afford to spend time and film money shooting you. The Honolulu Star-Bulletin read an article about the expression session that included a photo, the caption of which read, "Girls like Patti, Pannicia, and Sally Prang are seeking to change the image that women surfers are curiosities endowed with too many male hormones." That is so wrong on so many levels. The only sponsor that reached out to me was a company called Candy Pants. They were edible underwear. I think they were cinnamon flavored. Candy Pants wanted the women to show up wearing candy pants as part of a Waikiki display. And I kept wondering what they expected us to say there on that sidewalk, and we joked among ourselves, "Excuse me, Mr. and Mrs. Waikiki visitor, hungry?" That's how it often was for us. If we didn't stand up for ourselves, we would get squished, ignored. If we did, the reaction was often, wow, she's kind of a bruiser, or worse. We, all of us together, women and men, must work hard to not allow the history of surfing to continue to be swallowed up by the perspective of one gender. And funny thing, it's still happening. Let me give you an example. In 1976, Fred Hemmings formed IPS, which laid the foundation for the first World Tour and the precursor to today's WSL. He said to me, I just asked Randy Rick to head up the men's division. Why don't you join me and run a women's division? Since we'd already been working together on contest criteria and invitations, it was really just a matter of formalizing my affiliation under this newly created entity of IPS. Yes, I said, I made $100 a month. So imagine my surprise when recently a group of men were named the founders of pro surfing at the Founders Cup contest at the Surf Ranch. Not founders of men's pro surfing, but founders of pro surfing. And one of the men said to me, a few of us took a poll. It was unanimous. You and the rest of the women are not really founders because you weren't there in the beginning. We know that because you weren't at our meetings. I don't assume that anyone's motives in overlooking women's roles in history and surfing are necessarily based in hostility or even purposefulness, but I say to you now what I said to him. They weren't at my meetings. And they weren't at Lisa's meetings, and they weren't at the Huey's meetings, and they weren't at Debbie Beecham's side when she struggled in the 80s to reinvigorate the tour with new contests. It's easy to make assumptions based on one's view, but the view from one's own armchair can be myopic at times. And now, not 10 years later, not 20, not 30, but a half of a century later, that slap felt to me and to other women, some of them here in this room, just like the 1970s all over again. When I look at some of the contest media, I often see events listed as, for example, the Margaret River Pro, that's the men's, and the Women's Margaret River Pro. In other words, the men's is called just the Margaret River Pro. And I wonder, will we be doing that at the 2020 Olympics? Because I don't recall the Olympic Committee awarding gold medals for the giant slalom and the men's giant slalom. I've seen so many screenshots like that from all the surfing websites. They aren't just words. They reflect a mentality that has been with us for decades, one that does not exist in many other sports today. And it serves to further institutionalize the notion that men's participation is the norm and women's participation is the deviation of that norm, a side item. And this circular mentality perpetuates itself. There should be no mainstreaming of one gender over the other. It's as if the writers and editors don't even notice that they're doing it, but many of the women notice it. Yeah. So, if I may offer this constructively, not just to us tonight, but to the surfing world in general. I'd like to suggest that many of surfing's self-proclaimed historians refresh their perspectives, check their assumptions, reevaluate what others may have told you or what you might have read or thought back then, because we were largely ignored. And in today's climate, ask yourself, how are women still not regularly included in the history of surfing and the founding of pro surfing? We were small in numbers, but we were a vital part of it that cannot and should not be ignored. We were there, we were struggling 10 times harder and getting there a whole lot slower through no fault of our own. Because as said by a federal court in the leading Title IX case on women's sports in response to universities not offering as many scholarships to women by claiming there's just no interest. There aren't as many women applicants, so it's not fair to the men to split our scholarship money equally. The court said, quote, interest and ability rarely develop in a vacuum. They evolve as a function of opportunity and experience. In other words, to do otherwise just perpetuates the status quo. It's that old cliche, build it and they will come, nurture it, and it will grow. There are so many women in the water today, and they are watching and listening to how our history is being told. To the surfing industry, I say, The women are your consumers. Don't cut them out. Don't take their money and then spend half as much compared to the men when you sponsor women surfers in their contests. Because that's what most of our companies have done. Not all, but many companies in this industry. And if my daughters and their friends are any indication, this generation won't stand for it anyway. History wears the face of those who write it, so I challenge you tonight to take this refreshed perspective home. There is a rich history here, but it's been largely obscured by the vacuum created by the perspectives and experiences of those who influenced surfing, those who wrote about it, those who photographed it, those who sponsored it. To the women, I say, use your voice, whatever platform you have, to speak up and encourage other women to have confidence to do the same. Whatever may have been said or done in the past is the past. We can't change that. But we can make a new beginning, all of us here. And the true measure of our acceptance will be what happens from here forward to our history and to our future. I want to close by sharing something someone whom I didn't even know said to me in the water once while surfing big waves on the North Shore, which is where I spent most of my youth and my serious surfing years. And I still hear his words today. Just as a really big set was coming in, he looked at me and pointed to the channel and said in the nicest and most sincere way, "Better paddle, girlie, you're right in the lineup." Oh, I paddled all right. Straight to the peak of the biggest wave of the incoming set. I broke my favorite board ever on that wave. And some of you may have seen what has turned into a popular photo of me walking down the beach holding half of it, one under each arm. But I would do it again in a heartbeat, because I will never forget the drive and the determination that his remark gave me. And you know what? That's just one story of hundreds that many of these women here have experienced. So talk to them tonight. Ask them to tell you a story or two. I toast our honorees, and I also toast all of the surfer women here tonight, and those individuals and those companies and those organizations who came tonight to acknowledge women. I toast you with the Hawaiian word imoa. It means to move forward. Move forward together with fortitude and dignity. Now let's focus on honoring and appreciating our honorees and their contribution to our sport. It's going to be a spectacular night for all of us. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, the incomparable Patti.